Hi, this is Mika. Welcome to Leap Taken. Here at Leap Taken, I talk about all things witchy, craft related, law of attraction, manifesting, esoteric, and everything else in between. Today is part two of my Cottage Witchery series. So, this is part two of three. So, thank you for tuning in. And so you don't miss any of the other, well, part three, because it's only three. But so you don't miss it, please go ahead and hit that little bell please, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't already as well. And go ahead and throw in a like for the video because apparently that's a big deal in the YouTube world. So it'd be great if you did that. I kid, do what you want, but please, hopefully you enjoy it. All right, so part two. Part two is focusing on protection work. Um, I had mentioned in part one about almost one of the top goals of being a cottage witch is maintaining the balance of energy within the home. That's going to show itself in various ways using different tactics, different types of magics, and so forth, right? So, protection work. Protection work is yet another tool to keeping that balance, to maintaining that balance. So that's going to be super important going forward, is to make sure that that's why I made this a whole part two, because there's so much to protection work than meets the eye, than what we probably are accustomed to as a cottage witch. Okay, so why is it so important? Well, first and foremost, it's important because you want to maintain the integrity of the balance of energy and flow in your home, in your cottage, in your space. It's very important to do that because what's happening is your home is working with you, for you. It shouldn't be working against you. As far as the energy is concerned, the spirit, the essence of the home, it can help you, it can bolster you. So, in order for that to take place, you have to do your part. Your part of your practice as a cottage witch is to maintain that and protecting that, and to making sure that you put up necessary protection elements of your choosing, so that nothing is really messing with that balance. And if it does, what repercussions might come from that. So this is cottage witchery. So I just want to answer this. The thing about spells, and I'll give a story because it's just easy to do narration with some of this explaining it. The thing about spells is sometimes you need to reinforce or recharge. So here it goes. If you, like myself, if you want to set up a crystal grid of your home, in your home, or in and around your home, we're probably familiar with crystal grids, right? Usually, I did a video recently for it where I have basically a circle, cut out piece of small thin wood, and it has a geometric shape on it. And you can put the crystals around that in strategic places on the shape, the geometric shape. And you can use that for manifesting. You can use that for a host of different things. It could be part of your overall spell work. Okay? You can also use that for protection. Expand on that. Instead of using that little circle of the geometric design, you instead see it with your mind's eye throughout the house. And that's where you strategically place your crystals throughout your house. You're creating a design and then you activate. So you're going to make sure you have like your center stone and all of that. So let's say this is what you've done. You as the cottage witch, you have all this set up as yet another level of protection for the entire home, or possibly even the entire property. The thing about that is, at some point, I would recommend recharging. And I believe most of us who practice as a cottage witch, that's some of the stuff that we're doing. We're reinforcing, we're recharging, low-key respelling, possibly some of the protection that we have in and around the home, or even for the people in the home. More about that. But basically, I'm not so much as reinventing the wheel every time. In the case of crystals, well, I said recharge them. Now, I would approach that a lot differently because there's just so much work involved in placing the crystals and honoring the grid and so forth, and respecting what the crystals are doing, and having the expectation of the protection itself. this is not something where you take those and you gather them all up and charge them at every full moon or new moon or whatever moon you choose to charge with. That's not typically something I would suggest because of the type of magic and the type of protection that you're doing. You may not want to remove all of those for the purpose of charging and then putting them back. Instead, or so often, instead, I would suggest maybe seasonally. As a cottage witch, you typically are vibing, you're in tune with the seasons to begin with. That's a big part of how I practice my magic, is seasonally. So with that, there's certain things that you do seasonally. And what you would want to do is in your planners or in any place that you keep track of all your magical works, yeah, you might want to go ahead and pencil in, every 3 months or so, the seasons as they come, and just jot things down as far as reinforcing, recharging, maybe the full moon during the next season, the next solstice, during either during or right after the next solstice is when I would charge that crystal grid that's around my home, that sort of stuff. So I just want to make sure I'm painting the picture that as a cottage witch, yeah, we do a lot of protection work in and around and for the home and the inhabitants. However, it's not like we're just doing it repeatedly, the same thing. It's more about recharging, reinforcing, or sometimes there's a new threat, there's a new issue, and you have to protect yourself against that as well. That requires more work. So a lot of cottage witchery is doing a lot of protection work, which we'll get into that. So now that you're kind of hopefully getting an idea a little bit more about cottage witchery and how that works, there's some interesting things about being a cottage witch. Do you realize that along with other witchcraft as well and other type of magical type of systems, you can petition for help? Well, for us, there will be house spirits that we petition to protect our property, to protect us against actual mundane human issues, problems, or people. And then there's also, just in general, animals, possibly, wild animals and things of that nature. But you can use house spirits and employ their help in doing so. And when I say house spirits, yes, I'm talking fairies. Yes, I'm talking fairies and some other spirits as well. But please know that you can use these house spirits, fairies, and so forth. We'll go into that definitely for sure, but the specifics. But you can use those for the purpose of aiding in protection of your home. Actually, I think that's a wonderful thing. And another part about that, if you feel as you're watching this, and this is something you'd like to just jump in and start trying, that's fine. But if you feel like you're doing it just to see, out of curiosity, but not like a real pull or like you're answering a call, I'd caution you getting involved specifically with fairies. There's some rules with that, and there's other house spirits, entities as well that you want to approach them because they can be tricky. Usually doesn't like result in something horrible, but they can be tricky. So you want to be mindful of that when inviting them in to your space and to work with them or to work with you. So just be mindful of that because they may need offerings more often than you're comfortable with. Providing offerings and other types of attention, and when they don't get attention, sometimes they act up, and that is always interesting to see for people who maybe didn't fully comprehend or didn't fully buy into the concept of how spirits might work and how they can be tricksters. So it's important to keep boundaries and maintain the relationship where there's a mutual respect, because if you don't, the people are always surprised at the weird wonky things that just start happening that shouldn't technically be happening around the house. All the plants die. It seems like this one animal just keeps getting in, and you've done everything. You've bought the spray, but these animals are getting in, destroying your garden. You'll have situations where things in a house, you put something down and a cup always spills. It makes absolutely no sense. It wasn't even near the edge, so how did it spill? Did the house tip over? Exactly. Those are the acts of, maybe some tricky house spirits who or seeking to get your attention. It's not so much about revenge, it's more about attention. So caution with that if you're ready to go into it, but it's super fun and it could be, if you live alone, actually, it could be great knowing that you're not really alone. They are there. But then again, if you're practicing witchcraft, you probably have got it by now. Even when you're alone, are we ever really alone? There's so much that we can't see with the human eye, but it's there. They are there. So just keep that in mind as well. But yeah, so protection is a huge part of cottage witchery, and I'm going to just go further into detail, breaking all that down. It's a lot more nuance to it than, like I said, what you might be thinking based on, the regular practices of witchcraft. So here we go, house blessings. So as far as the house blessing goes, or even a room blessing, because if you're in a hotel or if you're in a situation where there's other people in the home, okay with that as well. I completely understand. Or if you've just planted a garden or something like that, now those plants, those herbs, that's their new home. So what do? Well, there's a lot of different ways. There's very simple ways of doing house blessings. A sage stick, and you simply just say, I bless this house. It could be really that simple. It could be even more elaborate where you have multiple people. You're all wearing a specific color to represent your intention, which is for protection. You have, a choreographed lines that each of you are speaking, maybe break out in song. There may be music playing. You may have a bell going around. Yeah, there's sage, but also, there's water being sprinkled in certain corners of the home. Um, a floor wash is used after everything is done, from room to room to clean the floor, not just mundanely clean the floor, but actually cleanse it from a metaphysical point of view. So it can get very elaborate, but the key thing, yes, key thing to remember with your house blessings as a cottage witch is you're going to be really focusing on, yes, the positive in, the positive out. You want to set up protection, but you want to be very mindful, along with other things. Mindfulness is part of cottage witchery, that you are leaving room to interact with the spirit realm, to interact with these house spirits and things like that that you might want to invite in and have offerings to. That it's okay to be in that space and be on that property. So you want to word your blessings and be very mindful about leaving it open to the universe to understand that you don't want to seal off completely and no spirits ever can come into your space, because you're going to be working this. That's your home base. That's where your craft will most likely take place, whether it's actually inside the home or in the garden or on the patio or, basically around the home or in the home. So you just want to be very careful about that as well. And thinking about that, those words will matter. Your intention will matter. You're not trying to seal off completely. You are going to be diligent in saying you won't, only if invited in spirits, and you can put this in rhyme if you're not, or if you're like me and you have no bars, just say it. Just say it. Um, but you want to just speak what you really want and what you feel. You want the house to be blessed. You want peace in your home. You want balance in your home. You want the energy to reflect you, perhaps. You might want to say that. Or, positivity or something of that nature. And you want to make a point to just speak on the fact that you want spirits who are welcome and invited to enter, and those who wish ill will or wish negativity or wish wrong or evil, you can even go as far as to say that, on you and those in the home, they are not allowed. You can go even deeper than that. If a spirit was invited and their energy has changed to be disruptive, disloyal, um, or negative, they also, you can say, they are no longer allowed. It's sort of like a eject button that you're setting up, metaphysically speaking. Your house will know, oh wait, you acting up, you're out of here, and that spirit's ejected out. It could be that simple, but depending on the type of spirit we're dealing with, you might have to do some more work. But that's another story. Anyway, hauntings, that's a whole other thing. But what I will say is this. Blessings are a great fresh start and an opportunity. Now, notice I'm talking about you moving to this space. I haven't said anything too much about the actual energy of the home. If you've moved into a space, most likely that home has its own energy. It might feel very young if it's a younger home, and it could feel otherworldly if it's a really older home. So, be mindful of that as well when doing your house blessing. You don't want to, well, for lack of better words, offend the house. You don't want to do that if possible. So you want to make sure you're being respectful of the energy that's always there, but understanding and sort of inserting your dominance. You're the caretaker now. You're the person taking care and maintaining that home and owning the home, living in the home. So we go, making sure your blessing includes that information that you are now the head of the home. This is your home. And that way the house understands, the energy understands we're all working together now. You're not working against me or just for me. We're in this together. So you want to make sure your house blessing includes that type of information. It's actually really important. Along with the typical way we see people, maybe you've seen people sage a property, a room, the whole house per se. Um, when you're a cottage witch, you're looking, yeah, you're doing all those things too. That's, part of cleansing in general. So that's a step whether you call yourself a cottage witch or not. However, the things that a cottage witch is going to pay a lot more attention to when doing that are making sure those doorways, all the doorways in the house, either enchanting them and or warding, putting wards around the door. So when I say enchanting a doorway, you can enchant a doorway to, for instance, your home office. Every time you walk in your home office, you want a tone to be set. You want a certain mindset and certain attitude. You would enchant that doorway so that every time you walk through, that's, this positivity, this creative, successful, confident self comes alive. And that's what you do as soon as you walk into the room. You're on that vibe. So you can enchant it to do so. Where my front door, I would put wards on against physical threats. See what I mean? I would be making sure that I'm addressing any physical in real time threats. Meaning, there's a knock at the door. I don't know who it is. It doesn't. Let me be clear. When you set up wards for physical threats, it's not to say that that takes care of everything and you don't have to worry. I still have an alarm. We still have cameras and so forth. We still have the means to protect ourselves. That's working in duality, from witchcraft and from mundane side. I'm covered in both places. I'd rather not be exposed security wise in either capacity. Everything has levels. So the ward at the door as a cottage witch is my first line of protection. Okay. If that is breached because someone's will was, for whatever reason, their will found a weakness in the ward and they came through anyway, then I have an alarm. Then I have other means of protection, to take it a step further. But it's just one more level in all of, the levels of protection of home security that hopefully we all have, on some level. But as a cottage witch, you're warding the door. Now, gratefully, I'm knocking on wood. It's over here, knocking on wood that I haven't had any issue and I don't plan on it. And that's the sort of stuff as the cottage witch that I do focus on, as well as making sure that this space that I'm currently occupying is a space that is not inviting that energy, someone who feels like they can come in and just take something from me. So that's important as well. Warding. So protection, and within the protection you can enchant your doorways and obviously do your wards as well. And of course, along with the actual process of doing that, that could be anything from taking a certain oil and putting it around the entire doorway. You can sprinkle herbs, depending on the level of work that needs to be done with the home that you're in. If there's painting involved, You can even, put symbols with the paint. You can just put symbols in general, but you can do it with the paint as well, and runic symbols, or anything that you consider that symbol means protection. Whatever resonates with you, you can also put that on the door and on the doormat, or underneath on the ground on the doormat as well. Technically, that's the threshold, but that counts as well, having this conversation about entryways and doorways. Um, Part of all of this cottage witchery is seeing your home as sacred space. And if it's sacred, then we want to protect sacred space. So now I'm back to, instead of real life threats, let's go back a little bit into metaphysical. So where you're placing, certain items, your altars for that matter, um, even where you're placing, just your storage for your witchy items, that's going to matter. So it's important that your home is set up in a way that makes sense to you as the cottage witch, makes sense to you as far as the flow. So you want to, if you're not sure about flow and all that sort of stuff, another thing is to look into feng shui. You can look into that and see if those principles sort of resonate with you, and you can set up your altar space and your supplies, in that order that you would have learned about. For me, it's all basic to intuition. I'm just going basically off of what feels right. And for me, I have different spaces around my home for different things. Um, my main working area, that's not on camera right now, but that space, that's where I also keep my supplies. I kind of like having everything on hand when I'm doing workings, or very close to me, so it makes sense versus having my supplies in another room and my craft working area, in a different place. That's not going to be super helpful to me. So you want to be mindful of that sort of stuff. And here's where we come under the protection. If you are in a situation where you are sharing your home with other people, now you have to be very mindful about who's getting into what, and if they're allowed to touch certain things, if they have access to it. So there's a way, in a cottage witchery way, to handle that as well. Okay, so if you have like a closet, or a chest, or a cabinet, or some place that you close off, and that's where most of your supplies are, or even your altar. Not everybody leaves their altar sitting up because you may have a toddler. What you want to do is, first of all, when you're talking about toddlers and children, well, toddlers, try to rationalize with a toddler. It's not fun. But with children who can understand, you simply tell them not to touch that. That's mommy's, or daddy's spiritual supplies. I am an advocate of just being direct. I never really did baby talk with my kids. I talked to them directly. Did they still disobey? Of course, they're children. They test boundaries. But for the most part, being just kind of straight with them was helpful, in them understanding, even if they did test boundaries, unless they actually went into the cabinet, the punishment usually resolved that issue and they were no longer touching the cabinet. But in situations where you're dealing with maybe older folk, not just children, well, typically with children, you got to keep your eye on them anyway, right? And they're very curious, even if you tell them not to touch it. But with older children and adults in general, um, obviously you want to have mutual respect in your household. So if you say not to touch something, they respect that and don't do it. You can also go ahead and enchant that, or put a protection spell on individual items in the home. So there's the home itself. You have wards around doorways. You have protection. You might have a crystal grid. You might have powders all throughout the property. You might have buried stuff around the property as well. But within the home, you may need to do additional steps for protection. So that cabinet, that chest, that special place, you may want to go ahead, not may want to, you're going to need to go ahead and put a protection spell on that as well. And there's a couple ways to go about doing that. You can make that cabinet or that space seem just so unattractive or almost invisible, where it's never really noticed. No one wants to touch it because it's just another piece of furniture in the house. So you can enchant it that way. And then you can actually add layers to it. But if for any reason that was breached, You, depending on how far you want to go, you can make it so that something bad happens to the person who does it. The level of bad is up to you, or you can make it so that it won't open, or if they open it, it's again, they don't really see anything there of importance. It's based, so they open a cabinet and nothing's there. And a great situation is if you have people over, and you have a cabinet and someone's looking for the extra napkins or whatever it is you sent a guest or a family member to go look for, and they just open the cabinet to look to see if something's in there, and then they would close it. That's still the spell work and the protection spell. Whatever's there did not register to be looked through, and that's just as fine. So I'm kind of going into all of this because I realize that everybody doesn't live alone, or everyone doesn't have um, physically safe places to store things, because you have other people in your home who are kind of futzing around and messing with your stuff. But there are protection spells you can do. There's different layers, that you can do. Again, my favorite is just to make something look innocuous and really unimportant, and that way it's just left alone. So you don't have to worry about, if you are someone who kind of goes into the threefold law, aka Wicca. If you are in that mindset, having something bad happen to somebody if they touch something might not be okay with you. So maybe the other type of protection might work best. Okay. Um, Speaking more about seeing your space as sacred, uh, keep in mind when you set up altars, they can be a portal. Um, Maintain them. So maintain them. The last thing you want to do is set up an altar and not come back and clean it. Now, we have all probably have been guilty of letting too much time go by before you kind of wipe the dust off, or refill some water, or rearrange the flowers, or put a fresh new offering out. We all may have that issue. I completely understand life. We are living beings, we are complex, we have different things going on. Some of us get ill, or we're caring for others, and life just gets busy. And you don't mean to make part of your spirituality kind of go to the wayside, but it can, because it's not like blaring a lot like the other things in your life, like work and schedules and kids and all that other sort of stuff. So altars. Even in the midst of that, I'd like to believe that the people or the beings that you set the altars up for understand your life. You've invited them in. They understand what's happening. They already understand that you have a lot going on. I don't believe that there's this thing where these beings that we're interacting with in other realms are actively always trying to catch us, and catch us slipping, and want to punish us because we're not meeting all their demands. And if you are working with some sort of spirit being, entity, goddess, god, who that seems to be the experience, I would encourage you maybe to reevaluate that relationship, because I think that's a bit much. Now, if you're constantly making demands on these entities as well, and you're not reciprocating with offerings or time or attention or detail and all that sort of stuff, all right, you might have an issue, which is what I'm trying to get you to avoid, to not have to deal with that. You want to avoid that, being in that position, because things can go awry. um, Maintain them. And when I talk about the altars being a portal, remember about the wards and the protection in and around the home. I gave the example of having a crystal grid possibly set up as well to reinforce. You're going to have a blind spot with that altar space if you don't maintain that altar, because that is a portal, especially if you have successfully, on many occasions, contacted that whoever the altar space is for. We'll go with let's say it's for a goddess. So you successfully contacted this goddess. You've had you've communed with her, you've give offerings, but life has gotten busy, or whatever the situation is, you're not maintaining that space like you used to. That physical altar space is not being cleansed. You're not going to it. Well, in that situation, things can go awry, but what you can do to sort of give yourself a bit of protection for that sort of situation is be very clear about who you're working with, ancestors, goddess, spirit in general. When you set up your altar in your home, intention matters. So you're physically putting the pieces there to get it set up. You're probably going to do some sort of ritual to consecrate that space, that area as an altar space. And then there's the petition to whoever you're reaching out to. And when I say petition, petition can be verbal, doesn't have to be written down, but basically you're reaching out for that connection, saying, this is the portal, you can come, here to get to me, and I can get to you this way. This is where you'll find offerings and so forth. So once you establish those boundaries and those connections, as part of that introduction, boundary, and connection, kind of like an orientation. If you've ever gotten a job, new hire orientation, you want to be very clear about those boundaries and letting that portal, that energy understand as well. You want to make sure that it's very clear that it's only for this entity, this being, this spirit, and they are not allowed to come through without your permission. Okay? You may want to get certain items that you've encoded, energy encoded, for the sole purpose of protecting so that nothing else comes through unless you're sitting right there and you want it to, unless you're asking it to. So that's where you're going to use maybe certain crystals. You might want to use occasionally. Now, if you're not maintaining very often, this is something you might do every couple months or maybe monthly, where you burn a certain candle, anoint it in a certain oil for the purpose of that protection. So a certain candle, probably black. The types of oil that you use, I might use a Van oil for that, for that purpose. For the whole purposes of just kind of keeping that protected and letting that candle burn. And you do that process again, reinforce it, along with maybe having crystals or certain stones or, again, symbols around it. You can even make it so you get something almost like a coaster, and you can put a protection symbol in it, a sigil that means what your intention is, where only what you have reached out to can come through when you interact with them, when you want to. They can't come through all willy-nilly. So you can get something like the size of a coaster and keep that on the altar space. When you're ready to have that interaction, commune, put offerings out, remove said coaster with the symbol on it. And that's also a ritual as well, where, okay, now I'm opening the door, so to speak, and here we go. And then you can have other types of symbols, markings, crystals, rocks, whatever you see fit to enchant or to use the energy of, for the purpose of when you're actively working with the altar, that you're protected as well. Your overall home is protected as well. That altar space it's basically, there's a filter. So even though something's coming through, it's a little bit harder because you've set up a filter on there as well. So these are just some ideas as well that going into altars, because I realize a lot of us have them set up for various reasons. Not everybody does it for ancestors. Some people, like I said, do it for all different types of beings, entities, spirit, and so forth. So you just want to remember that's a portal. So maintain and treat it accordingly. It can be wonderful, but it could also be very dangerous. As a cottage witch, we're very aware of that. We understand that. Again, maintaining the balance of energy into the home, in and around the home. So that altar can really, blow up all the balance. So you got to be careful about maintaining that as well. Okay. My next subject to go under this is cleansing, but with spell work, actual physically cleaning your house. Okay, so actually cleaning the house. So let's talk about all this, doing a cleansing. So we talked about a house blessing. I gave an example of protection work around the home, in and around the home, using a crystal grid. So just the maintaining of the home. Maintaining is cleaning the home, making sure, you're getting up the cobwebs out the ceiling and the dirt off the floor, right? We're wiping off our furniture for the dust and debris and all of that. So while doing that, you can add, as a cottage witch, definitely, you're going to add some witchy element. It's going to be everything from putting extra drops of maybe even just plain essential oil. And I say plain loosely. But essential oil into it. One for the scent, the vibration. Um, Essential oil is basically the essence of the plant or the herb, I should say, right? So you that metaphysically speaking, in the magic world, that has certain plants have different meanings and uses for our witchy purposes, right? So using that essential oil is tapping into that. That's a very simple way of doing things. I spoke about floor washes. Honestly, that's fine. You can add that to whatever solution you already are using, commercial solution, and you add your drops. That's basic enough. Your intention is there for you to be mundanely cleaning, getting actually dirt and debris up, but also anything that came with that that's attached to that in the spirit realm, metaphysically speaking, right? Um, Before we even get to all that, what I would suggest, if possible, depending on your climate, is to open your windows. Now, why? Because one, if you're using commercial cleaning products, you want to air that out. When you're using sage or certain type of incense, or if you're just burning herbs, you're going to want to let that air out as well. Let that collect the energy like a magnet that you don't want, the unwanted energy, and it just goes out the window or go out the doorway. If you're lucky enough to have a patio door, open that up too, and just let that energy flow out as well. That's also really important. You don't want to do too much of your cleaning with all the windows closed. If you, like I said, depending on your climate, if you're in a position where you can just open that window just a crack, do that. um, and make sure that that's going out. I realize it's cold. I live in a desert, so it's not freezing right now. It's actually great weather, so I can take advantage of that. But if you're a cottage witch and you are in the Midwest or somewhere in the Northeast and it's so cold, I understand. Grew up in the Northeast, so a crack. And I'm not asking you to leave it open all day. I'm not asking you to waste your heat. I'm not asking you to do any of those things. Just a smidge, a crack. Just give it about 10-15 minutes. Let things air out as best as you can. If you are willing to just kind of take it there, maybe open the door up a little bit and just, stand there with a broom. Yes, a broom, a witch's broom. Think of those brooms you get around Christmas time. They sell them in the supermarket, the cinnamon brooms. If you're lucky enough to have something like that, or you can make your own, of course, or just buy one if you see one. But use that as a means. You're not actually putting it on the floor, you're just wafting that energy out the door. You can also do the same thing with a fan. Get a fan that opens up and you can do the same thing. It's all symbolic, but also very important. Those gestures of you just moving mind, body, everything is connecting to you intentionally moving that energy out. In your mind, you'll believe that that energy is gone. So it's important that you actually believe this and that you feel that. Those actions matter. Those simple things of just taking your hand and trying to push the energy out the door or out the window. Yes, that actually matters. It's part of your cleansing spell work. um, what I also like to do is employ visualization, and I would suggest you maybe do the same when we're talking about doing a cleansing in the house. So we're still mundanely cleaning. Let's say you're wiping down countertops, surfaces, tables, and so forth. As you wipe them down, you might want to have maybe a spray or something like that where you've already put your intention on it, something that is maybe alcohol based so that it evaporates almost immediately so you don't destroy any finishes. But that's sort of your final thing. So everything that you go wipe around, you spray something akin to Florida water, but you actually have it in a spray. Now, as a cottage witch, you can easily just purchase these things, or you might make your own version of them. There are great recipes and things like that. Pinterest for sure is great for that as well if you want to take a look at that. Finding ways to do that. But these are just these extra steps where you're mundanely doing it and then you're cleansing from a metaphysical side as well. Um, I think it's important to speak out loud your intentions as you're cleansing your home, cleaning and cleansing your home. I think it's important to actually speak it out loud. Again, this is a witch with no bars. So my rhyming skills are just not there. So I just say it plain. I say what's on my mind. I'm very mindful, of making sure I order my words in a way that resonates with me, one, and that I know will resonate with the universe. That's trial and error. You'll learn over time and begin to trust your intuition. But that is what I do. That's why I speak it out loud. So your intentions for cleansing in your bedroom are going to be different from your intentions of cleansing in, let's say, your kitchen or your dining room or your kids' room. So, what is it that you're intending? What are you intending to protect from or invite in? So just, speak that. If you need to keep something on a piece of paper and go from room to room, then do that and then speak those words out loud. I would say it at least 3 times. 3 is a magical number. I would speak those words at least 3 times or long enough that I believe them and I believe that the energy in the home has accepted what I have intended and the universe at large as well. And finally, once you got all the cleaning done, the cleansing done as well, to the best of your ability, you cottage witch, then what you're going to want to do is just declare. You want to make a declaration, preferably in the center of the home. For me, it would be standing probably in the kitchen or what I consider the dead center of my home, which I think is going to be like a hallway. I live in a 1-story house, so I would stand there and just declare this house is cleansed. Um, so mo to be, that would be the end of that. Yeah, after a mundane cleaning, yeah, it's cleansed. So, and then of course, going around metaphysically speaking, cleansing as well. You make a declaration, this house is clean, the house accepts it, and we move on, and we, go on with the business of the rest of living in the house, in and around the home. Uh, that's pretty much it. Now, the only other thing I'd like to bring up as far as protection is let's talk about outside the home now. So, outside the home, we'll start with the front. So, the front of the home, obviously, this is going to differ because not everybody's front door opens directly outside where you live, right? So, for those of us who do have that, you open the front door and you're in the outside world, maybe there's a porch or something, but the point is when you walk out, you're outside. Uh, that is a perfect opportunity for you to, as I mentioned before, put protection. You could put anything, employee uses of hoodoo. That's is where that comes out for sure for me. Certain powders that I create, I put down. Dirt from certain areas you can actually put on your property. More about that. More about that in the workshop, by the way. Details are below, by the way, about the workshop. For the Cottage Witchery Workshop. This is the series where I'm going deeper here, a little deeper, but I'll be going a lot deeper on the workshop. So look in the description for those details. But anyway, yeah, you can definitely add protection outside the house, to reiterate. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have another, like I said, a porch or some sort of step or stoop or extra space, well, here you can put items out. You can actually put markings on the outside of the wall. Even the reef on the door can be a protective object for the house. So outside of the wards on the door, the porch itself, that can be your threshold. The step to get onto the porch could actually be the home, and you could protect that accordingly. If you are even more fortunate, you have land, whether it's a garden, grass growing, before you even get to the front step or porch. That's also something. Please protect that as well. Now, your intentions shift a little bit. So you're thinking about physical protection and you're thinking about metaphysically speaking. Physical protection, animals, loose animals, wild animals coming onto your property, people who have no business on your property and who mean you not well, and maybe even solicitors. So basically, people where their motivations are tricky and you can't trust it. So you want to set up your protection, your wards, all of that at that part of the property, not just at the front door. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit more work basically for us who, if you're fortunate enough to have a little bit more space, there's a little bit more work. I would suggest burying things um, at the corners of your property, assuming you have a perfect square or close to a perfect square property. But yeah, I would consider burying things if that's possible, whether it's a crystal or some sort of symbol of protection, whatever that is, you'll make that decision on what that is. But it would be buried for sure. I would definitely do that if I had larger property to work with. As far as the backyard, if you are fortunate to have a garden or just a patio for that matter, please don't forget that. I love to burn incense, climate depending, but sit outside and burn incense. Those can be purifying. It's going out into the air, yes, but it's kind of, you smell it, and that energy, the essence of the incense, is staying in that space. So I'm very careful about picking certain types for, boosting, reinforcing protection of that space. Same thing in the front. You can bury things. You can put crystals if you're fortunate to have a private, enclosed type of backyard space or patio area. Well, you can kind of do whatever you want. Now, can't you really, especially if it's private? You can put up, erect an altar space there with the sole purpose of, for protection. Maybe you're bringing in specific deities or spirit known for protection. So that would be great for, your outdoor area. That's possible as well. Either way, you want to take the same nuanced approach, diligence. You want to think about the area. What are you protecting? What do you want in? What do you want to go out? All of that matters. And speak that intention out loud when doing any sort of work to, act as protection. So that's it about protection. It's not so simple because it really can depend on the type of space you are. What are you protecting yourself from? Understanding why your intention matters per room, per space. And then, there's those other things that can get extra difficult to have conversations about protection about, and that's altars, for instance, or spaces where they're acting as a portal, because you need that space to be open, but at the same time, you don't want it just an open, unlocked door that's always available for any and every spirit to come through as well. So these are just things that to concern yourself with when you're talking about protection as a cottage witch. But it's also fun and it's enlightening because you're just becoming more one with the energy of the home when doing so. Because what did I say for the 1,000th time? Seems to be sort of the top goal as a cottage witch is to maintain that balance of energy into the home. I'm part of that. So me maintaining myself through self-care, which is a whole other topic, but me maintaining myself using witchy self-care and the people in my home being respectful of that energy as well. All of that goes into maintaining the balance, okay? So the last thing I'll say, and this is just as a bonus, is in the kitchen. Don't forget, a lot of protection as far as for the home can happen in the kitchen. Did you know that you can do something simple as boiling certain herbs, maybe fruits or roots, for the purpose of emitting the essence into the air, essence of those living beings, the roots, the plants, the herbs, and so forth, so that it permeates throughout the home, and that also acts as protection as well. So you can definitely do that, and then you can take said herbs, plants, roots, and so forth that have been boiled, and you can compost those and add those to the garden, and that adds another level of protection to your garden. Or if you're not, that far into gardening where you're composting, you can just bury them into the ground around your property, again, as another level of protection. So hopefully that was helpful in understanding why protection is such a big part of cottage witchery. And I hope that you walk away understanding that protection is a little bit more nuanced than, than maybe how it is approached. You have to be concerned about your outer space around the home, the perimeter of the home. You have to be understanding of knowing that you need to protect your altar space or any space that you set up where you're doing your magic and you're reaching out into other realms. For some people, don't forget, that could be the bedroom, especially if you're someone who dreams vividly and you're astral projecting as well. Please protect that space as well have certain things around where you sleep, under your pillow, under your bed as well, for just that extra level of protection. Again, it's not always about sealing everything off and nothing can come out or go in. It's more about adding a layer of a filter, so to speak, a layer of protection just to so that you can interact, without getting jammed up basically in the spirit realm. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this is helpful. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Otherwise, the workshop, the Cottage Witchery Workshop, will hopefully answer all the additional details. And I'll actually be showing you some of the things that I'm talking about in the Cottage Witchery Workshop. So that will be super helpful. Here, I'm doing a lot of conversation talking. You'll get that there as well, and reading. But also you'll get an opportunity to experience and have hands-on practicing of the things that I just talked about as well. So stay tuned for that. That's coming next week. So thanks again for watching. This is Mika, Lead Taken. Please like, subscribe, share. If you have already subscribed, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.